everybody, my name's Evan. I'm a photographer based just north of Los Angeles, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I am going to be having a conversation with another photographer, kind of like a podcast type format, just to kind of, break things down, deconstruct some of the nuances to photography and art, personal experiences, and yeah, so I'm happy to introduce.
Michael Kokorin, otherwise known as Life Flicks You in the Face.
Yes.
Shout
out.
Started photography about a year ago, so a little bit new into it, but I'm getting active.
Yeah.
Getting active.
Yeah. Definitely active.
Yeah.
So Mike.
Yeah.
I got a question for you.
Yep.
So you started photography a year ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what got you into photography? And what were you doing before that?
Well, I would say I've always kind of been using a camera ever since I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say I was like always taking pictures, but I was always very fascinated by getting like unique angles. Even when I first got like a smartphone with like the very cool camera, back then, like 2000, 2012 or whatever it was. And I really enjoy how I've been able to express my like the things I find appealing through photography. I forgot what the second question you asked was.
I also forgot. So let's just keep rolling.
Let's keep going.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting though. That's cool. So it kind of seems like it's a common thread, like not just with photographers, but creators in general. Like there seems to sort of be it seems to be a thing that happens throughout your life, whether like you're conscious of it or not. And whether that's like you were saying, like interesting angles growing up that you were paying attention to, or doing like home videos or whatever. It seems to be a popular theme. I don't think like everybody does that, but I know for sure, like I personally was taking photos. My dad was taking photos. He had his own film camera collection, and he like had this thing with landscapes and rocks, and he would go up to Monterey and take photos, and I would see those all over the walls, and it kind of inspired me. And so yeah, like growing up I was always really interested in it, and I never really had my own camera until I was like a teenager. But I did other creative things, and it kind of like translated inevitably into photography. I would draw, I would shoot little home videos, like funny videos with my cousin.
Yeah.
So I do feel like there's a common thread, like in the arts, and kind of it always, and you always end up one way.
Right.
Like there's so many mediums, there's no right or wrong medium. But yeah, so
do you remember the first photo you took where you were like, whoa, like I feel very proud of what I captured?
yeah, actually, so oh yeah, okay. So the first picture that I took where I was like, wow, this looks really nice. That was a picture actually of my dad at the beach, and it was really cool. There was like a seagull flying by, and the lighting was perfect, and it just like I was proud of it, at the age that I had taken it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like really the photo that I was like first proud of, that like to this day resonates, is it was a trip to San Francisco that I went on.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't been taking photos. I stopped taking photos for a couple years, and just the person I was with just so happened to have a camera, and I was like, hey, like, can I mess around with it? And so I was shooting around San Francisco just for fun, and I see this guy, and he's walking past this wall, and obviously there's a bunch of people walking by, but he stops in the middle of walking, and it looks like he's picking up a phone call, right?
Mm.
So he stops and he picks up the phone, and then I notice at the same time that the wall says, "Listen to this wall."
Oh.
So like, I really appreciated the irony of it
Yeah.
because he had put his phone up to his ear, and I got that in the shot while the wall said, "Listen to this wall." So like, that was the first time I had a story with
Right.
my photo, and I think that's kind of like what created the trajectory for me. It's like, hey, I can tell a story with the photo, you know.
That's
So
incredible. I feel the difference in how I started was when I started using a camera at the end of high school, I would just take it and capture moments with friends.
mhm.
So my photography wasn't really about story building in the outside world, but
Mhm.
more so about like capturing the energy and the vibe of the room with the people I was around. So it would just be like with my friends, like hanging out somewhere, or if we'd go out to the beach, I would take it.
Mhm.
I would just shoot videos and photos. And I remember I took a trip to Europe for about 2 weeks in 2016. That was like my first time like shooting with it every day. Like I took it
Oh
everywhere with
wow.
me. I would use it like wherever I could. And I know it was just mainly to remember the places I'd been, the things I'd seen, because I'll forget it someday.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was amazing to be able to talk to people and just gauge like their reactions about how they felt. I went to a street festival, so like I was talking to a lot of different people,
Mhm.
capturing photos of them dressed up and like Switzerland pride.
That's
It
cool.
was a festival there, so I thought it was interesting getting a completely different kind of experience that from what I'd been used to, just kind of capturing home stuff and
Right.
with people I knew. So that I feel like really broadened my view and perspective for what I should try and capture.
Mhm.
So I feel like since that moment I'd always been inspired, but there was like some sort of disconnect between me and digital. I just like I would enjoy it to a point, and then I
Mhm.
would get like bothered by it shooting digital.
So
So
at this point, were you shooting digital?
I was shooting digital
Okay.
at the end of high school when I was like 18,
Mhm.
but I didn't really start shooting again until I was about 23, just before that.
Okay.
And when I started that, I started on film. I just bought like an old used film camera, and I was very I should have looked up a lot more information about how to use the camera. I just kind of winged it,
Yeah.
and in some cases I learned a lot that way. But I will say like the first 2 months there was a lot of information I should have known or asked
Right.
about, so my pictures would come out properly. So a lot of them were duds, or I would open the back and it would just get exposed to light.
Mhm.
But I still think the process of it was so natural because I got to do it myself with zero pressure,
Mhm.
that it like really cultivated a love for photography like deeper than ever before.
That's really cool. And since we're on the subject too of film, what was it that made you wanna try film? Was it like a person, or was it like a video you saw
Yeah,
online, or
it was a person.
uh
My good friend Kieran, he had been shooting it for maybe a year before,
okay.
and I remember he would just take it out whenever we would go hang out or explore around LA.
Mhm.
And he would always like try and get me in like these situations, like if it was like a cool little building or like interesting car, he would just try and like create these scenes kind of. And I
Mhm.
feel like that kind of like built up like my desire for wanting to create with photography.
Mhm.
And then some time later, after I'd done some research into what kind of camera to start with, that's where I really started taking off and just taking it everywhere with me.
That brings up a really interesting point, because we know, Kieran is a music
Producer.
producer,
Yeah.
and we also know our other friend Ricky is a music producer,
Mm-hmm.
and it kind of goes back to the whole thing, like the arts are the arts,
Yeah.
and creativity translates,
Yeah.
and it's like interesting to me that they do music production, but they're also so interested in
Visual.
photography,
Yeah.
visual.
Yeah.
You know, like Ricky's getting really into the video side of things too,
Yeah.
and you know, I mean, it kind of seems like that's the way that that's the way that art is going. Like it's multimedia now.
Yeah.
There's no one single thing that you can do. Like you have to diversify. You know, you can't box yourself into one thing. Like you know, for him, it's like he has to promote himself some way, right? And he's able to do that through, you know, social media, obviously connections, but like through social media, you know, how else do you do it but posting pictures and videos and,
Hmm.
you know, getting your name out there. And
Yeah.
so like it's really interesting. And the same thing goes for photography, you know,
Yeah.
like now you're not just a photographer, you're like
You have to think about sound design if you're
totally.
putting out your photos in a way that, you know, packages them like in a reel, or you know,
Yeah,
you're cutting together a shoot using photos and videos, and music is a big part of how that's shown.
100%. Music's a big part, video's a big part. Like now with TikTok and you know
Instagram, YouTube,
Instagram and
yeah.
YouTube, all of that, you have to, you know, you have to have a bunch of tools on your belt. And you know, you can't just take a good photo anymore. It doesn't matter because there's so many people taking photos. I
Yeah.
mean, every random person on the street
Has access to
has
it.
access to it,
Yeah.
you know. So in order to stand out, you have to have those tools on your belt, which I think is
Yeah.
really exciting
It
actually.
expands your creative perspective, and honestly, I feel like it expands your creative depth.
Yeah.
You're allowed to go deeper on, you know, like building your vision like more complete, because you're,
Hmm.
you know, you're more concerned about the audio now, you're more concerned
Right.
about timing, like with editing. Like it's always good to know these things, because you just never know, like someone else that may do it for you, that maybe they're better at editing, maybe they're better at sound design,
Hmm.
but they may not know what exactly you need for your
Right.
vision to come to life.
Right.
So it's important to just practice and explore with it, because you
Yeah.
never know.
Yeah. You kind of become a director in a way, you
Yeah.
know? Like even if you're outsourcing your music or your editing, like you're the one with the vision and you have to create that vision visually and sonically, you
Yeah.
know? Um,
Understanding the language, you know, the more you learn in one field, that only makes your vision more complete,
totally.
as opposed to just like, oh, I want it to be kind of like this and maybe not so much of that. Like
Yeah.
there's stuff that gets lost in translation if you're not really aware of the, I guess, like the editing aspect of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And you know what? It kind of reminds me too, like we've talked about this before, but you know, a lot of my photography is inspired by different mediums of art, you know, like you know, I actually went to school for English and, you know, I did a lot of writing, I wrote a lot of poetry and you know, short fiction and a lot of my like conceptual shoots kind of come from my writing or ideas that I had from writing. Even if it was
mhm.
like a little like a little excerpt from something, I would expand on it in the photo and try and create a story with it. And you know, I think that like there's a free for all now, you know? I don't think that there's anything wrong with being inspired by a painting, for example, and trying to translate that into music, you know,
Mhm.
like people do that, you know, and
Maybe-
that's just for one example, right?
Yeah,
But
I
like,
mean, Ricky brought it up before, that one of my photos gave him inspiration for a song that he could make. You
right,
know, just based off what he felt from seeing the picture.
yeah,
So, like you said, it really does bleed into other aspects, like
totally. And the same
wildly.
thing is vice versa, you
Yeah,
know, listening to a song gives me an idea for a shoot, you
yeah,
know,
exactly.
and like it's just like you close your eyes and listen to a song and you either like see a color or you see like a aesthetic or a vibe, you know. And I think really cool and exciting. And I'm excited for the future to see, what all these new up and coming people are going to do with these different outlets,
Yeah, and I would say with photography, like it's only getting bigger as more technology kind of gets developed. I feel like photography is going to start expanding in ways that, like we have to kind of keep up to date
Yeah.
on so much. Cameras, every year digital cameras are getting more and more impressive, and I'm shooting film mostly, so I'm kind of like in a different lane,
Right.
but I still love it none the same, and I still want to be experienced in both
Yeah.
as much as possible.
And then there's the other aspect of it too, right? Which is like photo editing. And
Yeah.
it's like, kudos to people who are able to, take a photo and everything is just perfect in camera. But it's like, it's almost not even realistic to not edit your photos these days when it comes to, commercial projects, for example.
Yeah.
Like everything that you see on, billboards and posters,
Yeah.
like anything advertising wise, like there's editing involved,
Yeah.
and like even my film stuff, like I still, sometimes I still do get good edits in, like, to clean up skin or whatever it may be.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it
Because you
is
want to
another
make the
aspect.
photo exactly how you picture it.
Yeah, yeah, or at
Yeah.
least as close to it as you
Yeah,
can,
as close as you can get.
But yeah, film's a beautiful beast.
Mm-hmm.
Like I shoot film too, but I never got into the processing side of things, and that's something I would love to do one day.
Yeah, that would be the dream, but you have to have a space for it. You have to get all the chemicals for it, and it seems like a lot of work and it's a lot of risk.
Yeah.
Because if you mess up on it, you lose those photos forever.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can do it right, then it's like you have your own, I guess, like art studio developing room. You can have like a space for cutting all the negatives, and whatever you need to do, scan them after, print them if you have the I guess like the products for it to
Right.
print it. But yeah, I mean, I'd love to learn it and just to do it for, I would say, like at least a year,
Yeah.
just to see if I like how I develop my own photos as
Yeah.
opposed to where I outsource it to.
Right. And it's kind of cool to think about. Like, I feel like in order to be good at developing, or in order to develop, you have to love it as much as you love taking the photos.
Yeah.
Because it's like the other half of it.
Mhm.
The photos don't exist if you don't develop them.
Yeah.
And so there's like totally an art to that. And I think it's like, I imagine, like, I've never done it, but I imagine it's such a rewarding experience. Like not to use this analogy, but kind of like having a baby, right? Like it's like you took the pictures, now you like soak them, and you gotta wait for it to like be ready after you dry it or whatever, and
Yeah.
finally like it comes out and you get to see it after this like period of time, and you're like, I did that.
Yeah. You feel so proud of yourself for
Yeah.
creating this, like.
Yeah, we're missing out on that, man. We're
Yeah.
missing out on that proud moment.
We
What
are.
are we doing here?
We are.
Yeah. We're out
Mm.
here, worrying about lighting and microphones and stuff, and we could be
Yeah.
processing photos. But anyway, yeah. It's really cool, and I'm glad that there's sort of a revival of it, and that, companies are continuing to try and push out new film, like Cinestill, and even Kodak Gold doing 120 now, because they know that like the Pentax 6.7 and the Mamiya RZ are
Yeah.
like big cameras right now because of YouTube. And
And it's scary because that film's not going to be around forever.
yeah,
It's going to be around for as much time as they have the resources to make it.
Mm-hmm.
And then after a couple of years, especially with the revival of it, you know, could be gone in, let's say, like 2-3 years. Like I'm gonna be sad the day Portra is gone forever.
Yeah.
That's gonna be a sad day, but you know, I'm enjoying it while I can.
Yeah. And who knows, like maybe if there's enough people out there who you know start to get into film, like it's business is all about money.
Yeah.
Right? So if enough people are interested in it, well these companies are gonna hire people to learn how to, you know, make film properly, and you know,
Find alternatives.
dark rooms are
Yeah.
gonna have to, you know, teach people how to process film correctly, and yeah, so it's just a matter of, you know, are are there enough people who can keep it alive, you know?
Yeah.
So okay, so we talked about film, and we talked about kind of like the origin story, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
But now I'm interested, like, what do you feel like is your favorite photo that you've ever taken? And I guess why? Like, what, you know, what's the story leading up to it?
I personally would say I feel like for me it kind of fluctuates sometimes. I look at a photo months later and I feel like it becomes my new favorite photo.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say one photo that I've just really loved every time I looked at it was a photo I got of you in Mammoth in March. Or sorry, end of February, and it was just a photo of you walking like to the mountains, like through the snow.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the way the light was, like the sunset light was hitting the mountains and kind of lighting you up, and it just like it told a story of like a guy who keeps going no matter what. Like,
that's cool.
and to me, every time I look at that photo, it's just like inspiring because I feel like I captured a moment, and you weren't posing for it, you were just walking, and I managed to get it. That's like my favorite kind of genuine photo. I do like planned and post photos too, but there's just something different about getting a genuine photo. Those are the photos I love to take the most.
Yeah.
What about you?
Well, I'm gonna go off on a little tangent real quick before I do it, but
Yeah.
that's a beautiful thing about street photography, for example. You know, it's like I love to tell stories through my photographs, and it's like street photography is like the next level of that, because the whole thing is like, okay, like, you know, you can look for like symmetry, or, you know, complementary colors, contrast, you know, but I think like it's amazing when you can capture a story in real time. Like, that is gold to me, you know? And I think that's what some of the greatest photographers of all time have, you know, been able to do exceptionally. And so I admire that, you know, any like impromptu, you know, experience where you're able to like find a story and capture that, I think is great.
Yeah,
you know?
the amount of times I've just randomly gone shooting in the streets last year, I feel like really kind of cultivated my appreciation for capturing genuine moments and, like you said, storytelling.
Right.
I feel like that just really boosted it to new levels, because you're not really thinking, like you're just kind of going off instinct, like what you see and kind of what you hear going on in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You're trying to capture that in the best possible way in the moment. And I've gotten a lot of photos, whether it was San Francisco or there was I think a few I got in Mammoth, and I got some in Mexico recently too. So I've been fortunate enough to go into different environments and capture kind of different life. But I gotta say, like, every time I'm out there, it just really like builds that love even more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's beautiful. Shout out to Old Town Pasadena, by the way.
Shout out to Old Town Pasadena.
You're my spot, man. For street photography, that's it. That's it right there, man.
Yeah, that's.
And also Venice Beach. Venice Beach has some interesting characters. There's some stories to be told there for sure.
To kind of switch topics, would you say that you enjoy how shooting in public like that, but let's say you have a model,
Mhm.
would you say you enjoy how you don't really know what you're going to capture in the background of those shoots? Like if you have a model and you kind of have a theme of like his
Mhm.
outfit, or maybe like a story you want to build through the location you're at,
Mhm.
would you say you enjoy it more not knowing what could happen in just like in the streets where you're
Um,
shooting, or do you think it kind of gets in the way of the storytelling at times?
I gotta be honest, personally, like I don't really like to mix the two because for me, street photography is really like a passion and a and more of a hobby, I guess you could say. Like I'm very passionate about it, and yeah, it's like it's more of a hobby and more therapeutic for me.
Mm-hmm.
And portrait and storytelling through that is it's a different beast, and in that environment I'm totally in control of the environment,
Mm-hmm.
right? A lot of this is studio settings, set building, etc. And I think like one of these scenarios you have no control, and the
Mm-hmm.
other one you have total control.
Right.
So I think like for me, having a model go out there and just like, you know, just kind of going for it and
Mm-hmm.
shooting, like for me, I can't do it. Like, I want there to be some purpose or intention. And maybe one day I'll find a story that way though.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one day I'll be able to tell a story through that sort of idea. I think it can be a cool idea for sure. What about you?
I would kind of say I'm the opposite way. I do like how if I have a model and I'm shooting, whether it's downtown LA, whether it's a place like Pasadena,
Mhm.
where I'm not necessarily trying to capture people in the background, but I just think it adds more life to it at times.
Mhm.
But that's also because I'm not shooting with like a studio setup. I'm not
Right.
shooting in a location with the set. So I think it would be different if I went with the intention of having that for the shoot.
Mhm.
But recently I've kind of enjoyed having a model and just a location, having them have several outfits to change into,
Mhm.
and then kind of putting them in spots not always where there's people around, but where there might be, and it might
Yeah.
add something to the photo later
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. I get that for sure.
Yeah, so
Um, and it kind of reminds me of like, one time we did a shoot in Ventura,
yeah.
and we just so happened to be walking by, and there was like was it like a Bronco or something? It might not even have been a Bronco, but it was like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, hey, dude, just grab the mirror on this Bronco and just look at it. And that was like one of my favorite pictures that I took that year.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool,
Yeah. So,
sometimes
so
using.
sometimes using that outside environment is enjoyable because you
Yeah,
because you can make a story from it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, totally. And sometimes it doesn't have to be about the story. Sometimes it could be about the emotion it evokes, and sometimes it's about nostalgia. I mean, let's be real, like nostalgia is a big part of our life, our existence. Like it's sort of something that fuels us, I kind of think, and it can be therapeutic. So like being able to recreate an aesthetic that creates nostalgia, I think is equally as important as telling a story, because instead of creating a story for you, it's bringing stories back into your head that you had already made in your
Right.
life.
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool too.
It's a good point. I can't really say I've ever considered that before, but I mean, now that you bring it up, it's very true. Like
Yeah,
a lot of life revolves around how we feel about our past experiences
totally.
and how we process them as time goes on.
Yeah, I know we're getting a little psychological, but you know what? I mean, Hey, that's the nature of the beast, man. We don't know where this is going. Okay.
Yeah, just
Um,
going with it.
but yeah, I definitely think like, since we're on the topic of psychology, I think like emotion is something that we all have, right?
Mm-hmm.
As humans, we all have emotion, and I feel like what the arts do is they bring out emotion. You know,
Yeah.
when you're living your day-to-day life, hopefully it's not like totally monotonous, but like you sort of need a break in that to like know that you are alive and exist. And I think like when you feel those emotions, it kind of puts you in check, and you're like, okay, like I'm alive, I'm real, I'm a real person, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I said, the arts do that, you know, like when you read a beautiful poem, when you know, watch a movie that like just, you know, crushes you, like The Notebook. Shout out to Mr. Gosling. You know, that's what it does, you know,
Yeah.
whether it's sadness, anger, like, I mean, you know, I
And
think it's awesome.
I have a question. When you've had a model for a shoot before, and there was a certain emotion you were trying to tell through that shoot,
Hmm.
was there ever a time where the kind of the model's emotion couldn't really match the vision you
Mm.
had in your head?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when you're doing these shoots, like, you are a director too. You're not just the. I kind of like compare it to filmmaking, right? You know, you
Yeah.
got your different roles. You got your creative director. You know, your director, your director of photography,
Mm-hmm.
and they all kind of handle different things. But like, you know, when you're a photographer, you're also the director because you are trying to get the model to do what your vision is, right? You're trying to get them to evoke that emotion. And so sometimes the models have trouble with it, you know, sometimes they don't quite understand your vision. So sometimes you have to like, instead of trying to make their pose contrived or their expression contrived, you know, you kind of got to talk it
Adapt
through with them.
or
You gotta,
adapt.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I think part of adaptation is explanation. You
Yeah.
know, I think like once somebody is able to like sympathize with this with the story, then I think it helps them. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not an actor, but you know, I imagine like that's what happens to some degree with actors. They have to
Mm-hmm.
kind of understand the underlying uh, you know, issue or emotion
Yeah.
in order to evoke it, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I've like you said, I've experienced kind of both sides. One side where the model was able to kind of give the emotions or the expressions and poses that I was looking for to
Yeah.
tell the story. And there's other times where I didn't really have enough experience to be able to explain it.
Hmm.
And I think like now looking back at maybe like two of those shoots, I would have done them a bit differently. I
Right.
would have come at it a different way where I could explain it better.
Yeah, and I think like that kind of reminds me of something that I do want to briefly touch on. But you know, as a photographer, especially dealing with people, you know, sometimes it can be a little difficult to direct the model, and not just in a like, can you portray a certain emotion or are you telling the story I want, but like just as simple as like portraits, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you have your own vernacular as a photographer, and you have to be able to make what you're saying palatable to the model. So like, you know, at first I didn't understand the language, and I'd be like, okay, listen, so like, you know, just kind of like put your hand on your chin and like tilt your head, and it's like it's robotic and it like feels forced because people don't understand the point of the pose that they're doing, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And at first I was so like obsessed with, you know, seeing these magazines and like these models doing like overextended stretches and stuff,
Yeah.
And you know, now I understand why they do that is because they're trying to showcase what the person's wearing, and you know, like for example, you know, when you're shooting ground up with a dress and you're trying to like, you know, show how big and grand it is,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you're gonna have to have them in a certain position that shows, you know, the leg come out further.
Right.
um, but you have to learn the language, right? And I think like just explaining to people, you know, just telling the story to them, you know, even if the story is, hey, listen, like we have this product and you know, we what we're trying to do is accentuate, you know, how long your legs look in it, or how, you know, how nice your legs can look in it, or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
you know, for example. But
Yeah.
I always try and explain, and I find that that's the best way to get people to get in the positions that you want.
And you feel like that took you like a little bit of time to learn and kind of master that, I guess.
It did, and I think honestly, cinematography helped with that a lot. You know,
Mm.
because before I didn't quite understand, but once you get into filmmaking and you kind of see how that process works and how, you know, directors talk to the actors, you know, it's like you see a light bulb come off in the actor's head when the director's explaining the scene to them, right?
Yeah.
Um, so why wouldn't I do the same thing, you know, instead of just like having trouble saying, okay, like put your shoulder like up in this weird position and like, you know, so um I guess that's sort of the point I'm getting at is, you know, it's all about explanation and understanding, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, the model's a person too. I hate when people say subject, like,
Yeah, I mean, because they have their own. Sometimes they may have a suggestion or a piece of their own vision that can completely add something like
oh
very,
yeah,
very good to what you kind of initially have in mind.
totally. And there's a fine line, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I think everyone kind of understands when they're maybe overstepping their boundaries with
Mm-hmm.
something, but like, you know, they're the point is they're people too. They're not subjects, they're human beings. And you know, in order to get a good photo, you gotta explain to the person, you know, the emotion or the story so
Yeah.
that they're able to, you know, make the photo even better, because they're there to help, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um so let's see, what else are we talking about today. I
Mm,
think we're coming to a close, but
yeah.
is there anything else you could think of, or any questions I guess you have? Or I guess I have a question. let's
Yeah.
let's end on this.
Okay.
You give me a question, I'll give you a question,
Okay.
and we'll end on that.
So my question is for someone that shoots on 35 millimeter,
Mm-hmm.
what's the biggest thing I should know for
Mm-hmm.
going to medium format?
Mm,
Because that is something that I'm gonna explore in the next few months. I know that.
sure, that's a good question. I think for 35 millimeter, it's definitely more user friendly. I mean,
Yeah.
depending on the camera that you get, but for the most part, it's more user friendly. Um, but I would say the biggest thing with medium format is you have to understand. Let's just say you're shooting 6x7, which is like standard. You have
Mm-hmm.
to you have to understand that, first of all, the focus is different. Like
Mm-hmm.
when you have a lens that's medium format and it's like let's say it's like 105 2.8 or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's going to look totally different than if you were shooting on a 35 millimeter at 105 2.8.
Right.
You know, the depth of field is totally different on medium format because the frame is bigger, you know,
Yeah.
the film is bigger, so you're capturing more space.
Right.
And I think really just like, I think with medium format, I don't really think like I don't really think it's about the camera. I think it's about, the use case, like what you're doing with the camera.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the one thing that I would say is medium format's great. The quality's great.
But
I love medium format. It's just sort of like the next tier in terms of like quality.
yeah,
But I think, people take iPhone photos and they go on to win awards. So
it's true.
that's the thing that I would say. Hopefully that helps. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that helps a little bit for sure.
Mhm.
Thanks.
Mhm.
And what would you say your question is for me?
My question is, you talked about the things that you like to shoot, and I guess my question is like, where do you see yourself going with photography? Like, do you see a specific type of photography that you want to kind of like hone and make sort of your niche, or like are you in exploratory phase?
I would say right now is definitely the exploratory phase,
Mhm.
but I would say I do love shooting portraits. I love capturing people above all else.
Mhm.
So if I can kind of develop a taste for like different portrait photography, where as you've said before, you can tell a story and not just take a picture of someone who looks good,
Mhm.
but ultimately it would be creative concepts, like doing
Yeah.
stuff that I would just really think about, like on a daydream, like, oh, what if I could have a person set up here, and I could
Mhm.
have like a light set up here, and just having fun with it using props. And honestly, that's ultimately what I want to do.
Mhm.
Like, I think when it's that's where my love is the
Mhm.
most right now.
Mhm.
But I'm still having fun doing other stuff like
Yeah.
BTS. I still enjoy.
Yeah.
I enjoy street photography a lot, even though I'm not like, that's, as you said, that's more of a hobby. You're not,
Mhm.
there's no one really getting paid for that unless if you have a huge following.
Yeah, there's a small demographic for
Yeah.
sure. A lot of people don't even get discovered until after
Yeah.
they pass. And
Yeah, that's true.
um, okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I wish you luck with that, man.
That's a good question.
Think you're definitely on the right track.
Appreciate it.
All right, well, guys, thank you for watching. Like,
Mhm.
this is totally, this was kind of like a test project here. It was more for me, really, because I enjoy talking about this stuff, but I hope that some of this has kind of like helped you guys, or given you some perspective. And I appreciate everybody watching. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.
Like and subscribe.